Please welcome Martin McDonagh.
That was good.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Oh, you get the fancy couch. I see. I saw all this backstage.
Well, I want to begin by talking about Ireland because I think it's a common misconception that you are Irish, when in fact...
Well,
Yeah.
it's complicated.
Okay, please.
Well, I was born in London, but my mum and dad came over from Ireland in the 60s and had me and my brother there. And so we were always going back and forth to the west coast of Ireland as kids. Our grandparents on my mum's side were still alive then. So I've always been sort of in between both places. I'd say I'm London Irish more than anything else, but I've only got an Irish passport.
Well,
Very handy these days after Brexit.
what is it? Is there something that has made you so often in your work on stage and screen come back to not only even just Ireland as a setting for your productions, but also particularly a series of islands off the coast? Let me just mention a few of these names. We have Inishmaan, which we have Inishmore, and now we have Inisherin, which was originally going to be, or there was a third. Was it Inisheer?
Inisheer, yep.
Okay.
Very good.
Tell me where that particular. The focus on that particular part of Ireland comes from.
When I was 6 or 7 years old, we visited Inishmore, the largest of the Aran Islands, as kids, because that's just across the bay from Galway, very beautiful county and city. My dad's from there, from the Gaelic-speaking area there. So that was his first language, weirdly. And I think it's the most beautiful part of Ireland, the whole west coast. My mum's from further up the west in Sligo, and that's where we used to go as kids much more often. But there was something, even as a youngster, it just felt, especially coming from London, where I grew up, just so you're in the middle of a city, concrete and steel and all that kind of stuff, and then going to this serene, beautiful, maybe serene might be the wrong word, but beautiful, cinematic, wild place. I guess must have had some kind of impact, definitely visually, and I think I've retained that, and I always kind of wanted to go back to that in a film at some point. But in terms of storytelling, the first plays where I felt free as a writer were all Irish. I'd been trying stuff that was sort of American set or British London set, and was sort of hemmed in by my heroes in those fields, like Pinter or Mamet at the time. But when I was writing plays, I think I combined those guys a little bit with some kind of wild Irish fucked up shit. And it all paid off.
Yeah, exactly.
I recommend.
And fun fact, correct me if I'm wrong, of all those Inish ... Inisherin is the only one that doesn't actually exist?
That's true. I had the title Banshees of Inisheer for maybe 20 years. I kind of wanted to round off this trilogy of stories set on each of the Aran Islands, and I had one set on Inishmore, one set on Inishmaan, as you know. The play that I wrote with that title didn't work, and then 8 years ago I tried something again which was a little closer to this. That also didn't work. And then I think even when I rewrote it 3 years ago, which is this version, it was still called Inisheer, I think. But I went just on my own after the script had finished and looked around Inisheer, and it's a beautiful place, but it was a little too small. There wasn't enough cinematically, I think, you could do there. So I kind of then, 3 years ago, got the idea that it had to be sort of a slightly more made-up place, using couple of different, whichever locations we found, they had to be different ones. And then we found that most of the good places were on Inishmore, the biggest of the Aran Islands. And I hadn't really discovered Achill Island, which is up the coast, closer to where my mum's from. And that was the place with Brendan's house. I don't know if most of you seen the film? Or? Yeah. So the house where Brendan Gleeson lives on that kind of horseshoe bay is Achill Island. And the lake is Achill, and the pub road is Achill too. Everything else pretty much is Inishmore.
One thing I was interested to learn prepping for recently, you were nice enough to come to our writer roundtable for the Hollywood Reporter, and it was you and Tony Kushner, who both two of our great playwrights, two of our great screenwriters, but very different paths. And in fact, while you became known first, I think, for your work in the theater, apparently would have chosen to be a film writer before a playwright. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, God, yeah. Even as like a 12, 13-year-old, I think that's when we got our first video recorder. And I kind of just watched thousands and thousands of films and fell in love with movies then. But the only plays I'd ever go to were when movie stars were in them. So I saw like Al Pacino in American Buffalo as a 14-year-old, and Martin Sheen when he used to come to London. So I never really had a fondness for theatre. Partly because apart from those plays, which are pretty kind of exciting and cool, a lot of the plays I started seeing in my late teens and 20s were kind of dull. You got to remember it's England. There's no one from England here, is there? Yeah, so I was kind of, but I was right. I had been writing for like 10 years, and the films I were writing were terrible, and blah blah blah. Radio plays were getting a little bit better, but when I kind of turned the page on like how to be a writer, plays were the next thing up. And I think I'd learned enough in those 10 years to have some kind of founding in dialogue and character and story, and then to transpose those tools to an art form which I didn't like, which was theatre. Something kind of clicked. And I think I tried to make plays as cinematic as possible and almost the opposite of the things I was seeing. And somehow I was sort of 24, 25 when this happened. And everything kind of fell into place at that time.
And then when you wanted to come, having established yourself as a man of the theater, to come back to film, was that, quote of yours, one of the fears I had being a playwright was to make a playwright's film, close quote. Does that describe what you mean by that?
I guess the fear was to make something that was just wordy and, set inside in a couple of rooms and wasn't cinematic, just talking heads. I'm trying to think of the worst examples of playwrights making films now, and I choose not to be bitchy. But I definitely didn't want to. I wanted my first thing, be it short or be it a feature, to be as cinematic as possible, which is probably why I chucked so much stuff into the short. Like
This Is Six Shooter that you won the Oscar for, yes.
Yeah, so it's 27 minutes, and there's, I think, probably 5 people die. There's a shootout. There's a rabbit that doesn't really make it at the end. There's a lot of crazy shit, and it's all on a train too, which I don't recommend as a first-time filmmaker.
But with Brendan Gleeson.
With Brendan Gleeson, yeah.
How did you guys, because I'll obviously ask you this about Colin too, but how do you connect with Brendan for the first time?
I think well, I know, weirdly, his brother is a carpenter, and he works on theatre sets. So I met his brother through building the sets in Galway for my first plays. I don't know if it was through that or not, but Brendan came to see a trilogy of plays in Galway right when I was around like 24, 25. So I'd met him there, and I guess, I don't even know if we stayed in touch, but I was a big fan. Like, he was like already 25, 30 years ago, the best in Ireland, as he still is. And so he was kind of godlike in a way. So I think I was speaking to the producer of who was going to do the short with me, and he said, who's your dream person to send it to? I said, well, Brendan Gleeson. And it's funny, you wouldn't usually think of sending a short to someone of that stature, but you hope, I guess the connection, him having seen the plays, I thought, okay, we'll give it a go. And he said yes sort of straight away, so it kind of worked out perfectly.
Well, and that was the beginning of working on film with great actors like Todd, who we just spoke with. You have listed how many? 7 actors for work in your films have received Oscar nominations. Frances McDormand, Woody Harrelson, and Sam Rockwell for 3 Billboards, and Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, Barry Keoghan, and Kerry Condon for Banshees.
Cool.
So that is quite a stat. And
how many did Todd get?
Pardon?
How many did Todd get?
Todd had. I'll let you guys.
I think might have beaten Todd by 1 there. But hey, who's counting?
Yeah. But tell me, like in your.
Oh, no, he's going to come out later. We got to do this.
Oh, shit.
Let's call it a draw.
Yeah. So, I imagine that a big part of that, it certainly helps to have great writing if you're an actor, but to be working from that. But can you pinpoint maybe from the theater or anywhere else where you've figured out how to kind of work so effectively with actors? I think one of the things you always fight for is rehearsal, right? Even on films, which doesn't happen often.
Yeah, very much so. I wonder. I listened to Todd's answer about that, and I guess for me it was I'd never directed any of my plays before, but I was always in the rehearsal room from day one with all of them, and would always be talking to the actors because I worked with a lot of good directors for stage, and the good ones aren't worried about that connection. I think the bad ones can be insecure about it, but the good ones will let you chat to the actors as much as you want. And through that process of 10 years of talking to actors, I think I had learned a lot that I didn't even know I'd learned when it came to the first day of shooting these films. Because I realized I know about character, but I love actors, and trying to solve issues between us is sort of, in answer to the question you had for Todd, is what is a director? I think that's it, is the friendship or the connection between a director and an actor, and trying to solve everything together, I think is the most important thing in a movie. But it was a tool I didn't know I really had. It didn't really come. I was too nervous, I think, on the short, but on Bruges, when we had the 3 weeks of rehearsal, it was the first time I kind of realized I did have more information than I knew I had. I did like actors, and I could explain why every line was there, or what I thought their reasonings behind each impulse that they had was. So that was a good thing to learn. I think I've carried that through all the films more than anything else.
And we'll note, so Brennan was with you on the short 6-shooter. Then both Brendan and Colin were with you on your first feature in Bruges, 2008. Great film. Colin was with you on your 2012 feature, 7 Psychopaths. And then, of course, you've reunited the two of them for Banshees. And I guess I just wonder, we've talked a little bit about Brendan, but I guess part A had Colin enter the picture. And then part B, can you pinpoint what makes them so good, not just separately, because they obviously are, but especially when you've put them together?
Well, I think, I guess I'd sent Bruges, obviously, to Brendan, and that was like, I think that happened really quickly because we'd made the short and that had all gone well. But I think Colin, I think I met 1 or 2 actors for that. Because originally it was sort of written for 2 English guys, 2 London guys, strangely. But so I was meeting some English actors and some Irish ones, but I just sort of fell in love with Colin as soon as I met him. I was a fan of what he'd done, but I also kind of thought there was something untapped maybe about him in terms of, he'd gone through a lot of kind of the leading roles. And he was great at that, but I kind of wondered about, the more secondary characters, the more sensitive, the more broken type of characters, I kind of felt like it was something that was unexplored, maybe. So, so yeah, we talked, and I loved him as soon as I met him, and then I kind of knew that Brendan loved Colin, and Colin loved Brendan anyway. So, so it was almost a no-brainer to get them together. And then we had like 3 weeks of rehearsals, and it was just like literally the three of us like on couches like this, and just having cups of tea and just talking through the script. And I was kind of terrified, because I hadn't worked with two actors of that kind of magnitude before. But I think everyone was, I think Colin hadn't been in a rehearsal process before like that necessarily.
And as he has acknowledged, he was coming out of a pretty bleak period, personally, professionally. This was a new lease on life, potentially.
Yeah, I think it was his sort of first or second one, after all of that stuff. So that's probably another, for him, scary part of the process. But it was probably the perfect way to change things up, having someone as brilliant and supportive as Brendan, and someone who was trying to discover things on his own like me. Yeah, so we rehearsed in Bruges itself, and I remember like at the end of some days we'd get bored and walk outside. And Bruges is so small, you would literally walk to the places where you were going to be filming in 2 weeks' time. And at one point we sat on a bench where I'd set the scene, and they just quietly started reciting the lines. And I was like, ooh, this is kind of good. This is, we should have a camera here. And literally from day one, that part of it was seamless and easy and a joy. There wasn't even too much. I'm not the kind of director who, has to come up with a bunch of motivations, or I couldn't really coax a performance that isn't there. For me, it's sort of getting out of the way of the actors and the script and sort of allowing that truth to unfold.
And so 14 years later, you get them back together for Banshees, although you had shown them each, I guess, a version of the script that you referred to a little bit a few years earlier. And I wonder, I guess, obviously these are very different characters, and they played in Bruges, in Bruges, I should say. But do you one thing that occurred to me watching, everybody's saying, please don't wait 14 years before you put them together again. But I wonder, have you ever discussed potentially a theatrical collaboration with them?
I've sort of tried in the past to sort of put it out there. They've sort of refused point blank. So that's that.
That's that, yeah. Well,
no, I think they would be great together on stage. Yeah. But I know it's kind of hard these days to get film actors to do theatre.
Beyond the limited engagements, yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky. And no, I think we'll do another film together. I think that's the best way to.
Great. Kerry Condon, who plays Colin's character's sister in Banshees, is somebody I think you might go back further than any of them with, right?
Yeah, even further. I first worked with Kerry when she was like 18, in like 21 years ago. She did the original Lieutenant of Inishmore in the RSC and in London. And she came to Off-Broadway as well. And she was like just dynamite in that. She had long hair to begin with, and we cut all that off. Well, the character had, very short hair, so you have to do that kind of thing. So she is this kind of punky, kind of raging young woman with a air rifle, and just blew everyone away. And we remained friends ever since then. She did 2 other plays of mine in the intervening years. But I always kind of wanted to write something for her.
And she pops up in 3 billboards.
She's the girl in the office who gets sort of punched a bit. But yeah, she was brilliant in that too. She's got a great scene with Caleb Landry-Jones and that. And but yeah, I really wanted to create something for her that allowed her to show, exactly what a master she is. And it's great when you do that and they just take it to a whole nother place.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
It's awesome. Banshees is, among a lot of things, I think it's fair to say, partly about the things that one feels one should or needs to give up in order to create lasting art, right? And the price one pays for doing so. Talk about the degree to which those are things that you have thought about in your own life. I think last night when you were introducing or presenting to Colin and Brendan, you made a little reference to the state of mind you were in when you picked up Banshees again to turn it into the version that we've seen. But just the price one pays to focus on art, the balancing act.
Well, I don't think I've had a terrible time of it, really. But I guess the years before the first play was on, you really had to sort of knuckle down, and there was an awful lot of rejection at that stage, which I guess you have to have some kind of an arrogance to get through it, or force of will, or whatever it is, determination. But I think that's probably a different thing to the themes in the movie. I don't really think that a writer or a musician even has to, even if they're creating darker things, I don't think they have to dwell in that. I don't think art has to come from pain. I think a lot of the artists I like have come from those places, but personally, it's nice. I prefer an easy life.
Yeah, right.
I think we've all been through painful things and tragic things and despairing moments, and to be able to tap into that is really, really important, and to tap into that truthfully. But I don't think you have to stay in that place. Hopefully, you can not be shy of it and be truthful about it, but not have to dwell there. So the whole debate in the film about Brendan's character, needing space and all that. You do need space, of course, but you don't have to go about it in that way. I'm on team Colin Farrell for this.
Yeah. The fact that you chose...
But then,
So.
He's a little bit boring. And what are you going to do?
Yeah. The fact that you chose to set Banshees in 1923...
Not Colin Farrell, by the way, the character.
Not a boring guy. Fact that you chose to set the film in 1923 certainly didn't make your life any easier in terms of finding locations and sets and period clothing and all of that. So I assume it was pretty important to you the fact that you went forward doing that. Can you give us any insight into why? I mean, we do know that at that time the Irish Civil War is raging on the mainland. Is that something that was important for you that we be thinking about when they're having their own civil war on that island?
Yeah, very much. That's exactly it. Yeah, okay, you answered that one for me, Scott.
Sorry.
It's to put it's one civil war with the backdrop of another civil war in its simplest terms. But weirdly, like setting something in a definite period like that was part of it, and finding locations that hadn't changed for 100 years was part of it too. I'd never made a period picture before, and it seemed like it's more trouble than it's worth, but it actually wasn't. Like seeing the actors come on, you literally see the characters appear off stage, and because of the costumes for some reason, and I was very fond of that, but no, it's all about war, I guess, the whole story and stupidity of that.
Yeah. One last question before we go on to the next chapter of all this. Take me into nomination morning of this year. A lot of people, I guess it's fashionable to kind of poo-poo it, but I think it's got to be pretty exciting that not only...
I love that. I think it's fantastic, yeah.
First directing nomination.
Yeah, thanks.
All four of your principal actors nominated. with the help of Paul Mescal, that makes it a full 1/4 of all 20 acting nominees are Irish.
Yep.
And Best Picture. I mean, just it's a cool moment, right?
It's amazing. And I know Paul from before. He was in one of my plays a few years ago.
Really?
So I love Paul. So it's great, like, to have your mates. That's the best thing about this whole experience this year, is like you're going to all these events, like last night, and you know, all of the governors and the Oscar lunch and all that kind of stuff, and you're just there with your mates. It's just so sweet. And they're all, you know, they're all nice, they're all fun. And I'm friends with the editor and the composer, Carter Burwell and Mikkel Nielsen, and they're there too. It's just like, it's just crazy, but fun.
Nice.